It was the great Billie Jean King who once famously said that pressure is a privilege. Well, the pressure is on. Hi, hello, and welcome into the Ball Don't Lie podcast, episode number 124. My name is Austin Elmore with you every single Wednesday, wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. Today, we'll be talking about the pressure that the Bengals are facing and the pressure of perception, something that's going on within the walls at Paycor Stadium, the impact that it's having outside the walls of Paycor Stadium, and where exactly this franchise goes from here. But before we do that, I have an observation that I made that I'd like to talk about. This isn't going to take up much of your time. If you listened to Cincy 360, you heard me touch on this last week. I can't stop thinking about it. It's bothering me. I want this to stop. We got to stop going barefoot in the gym. Listen, I am hand up. I'm not the skinniest guy in the world. I know that. For whatever reason, New Year's resolutions, they work for me. A chance to restart, a checkpoint, basically, where you can do something new from this point forward. For whatever reason, that's always seemed to work for me. And like many people this year, my plan was, hey, I need to lose some weight. I've had a rough couple of years. I kind of let myself go, and I haven't been taking care of myself, but I want to establish a routine and a rhythm. And so I got a new gym membership, and I've been working out there. And there is a person at my gym who goes barefoot while he's lifting. And I know that there are like benefits to lifting with flat shoes and with flat feet, and sometimes people do that in socks, especially with your back. I get that. I get that there's reasons for that. There's A, special shoes for that. B, you can wear socks. And C, ain't nobody want to see your feet. I'm so tired of it. And it's not just men. I've seen it in several gyms, men and women going bare feet in the gym. And it blows my mind why anybody would want to do that. And this might be a cancelable offense for some of you. I don't think men should wear sandals unless you're on the beach or at the pool or in your own home. I don't think men's feet should be on display ever. And that's just me. That's how I feel about that, especially not in a gym. There's so much stuff that could go wrong. I mean, the gym that I go to, they do a great job. They keep it clean, and they do a really, really good job with that. And I feel like it's a clean environment, but I ain't taking my shoes and my socks off. This same guy, now, again, it's more than just him. I've seen it in multiple places, but this same guy also does handstands and walks on his hands for like 10 yards. I would like to know the medical benefit of that and why exactly that's a part of a workout routine. I mean, we're not, this is not the United States Gymnastics Center, okay? Why are we walking on our hands in the gym? And then also being barefoot. That's crazy. It's just crazy. Them dirty floors and them nasty ass feet driving me nuts. That's my observation that I shared. And say what you want, but men, put your dogs away. Ain't nobody want to see your feet. All right, let's take a cup of coffee here, take a drink, and move on. Pressure. It's a privilege. That's what Billie Jean King said. And it is. She's right. She talks about, when you look at the definition, the meaning of pressure is a privilege. Feeling pressure often associated with high expectations or demanding situations is actually a positive sign that you have been given a great opportunity to achieve something and should be viewed as a chance to rise to a challenge rather than a burden. That's powerful stuff, isn't it? The Bengals are facing a lot of pressure. Why are they facing so much pressure? Well, April of 2020, they drafted a guy by the name of Joe Burrow. And you never really know how the first overall pick is going to go. There's plenty of busts to look back on over the course of the NFL draft. But it's pretty obvious right away. Joe Burrow, coming off the best season a college football quarterback has ever had, he's not going to be a bust. He's going to be a potential franchise-altering player. Fast forward a couple of years, February 14th, 2022, Valentine's Day 2022. Bengals fans woke up that morning. It was a Monday morning, and it was the day after the Super Bowl. They woke up that morning, fans, many of them for the first time, of a relevant NFL franchise. I've said that before. I stand by that. The Bengals were largely irrelevant, despite having gone to the playoffs several times in the 2010s under Marvin Lewis. They were largely irrelevant and had been since the 80s. They went to 2 Super Bowls in the 80s. They were very relevant then. They had done nothing in the previous or in the next 30 years leading up to 2021. They go on the run, they go to the Super Bowl. So you wake up Monday morning as a fan of a relevant franchise after that loss in Super Bowl 56. And a lot of people looking at that run, experiencing that run, myself included, were just happy to be there. Just thankful. Hey, I get to watch the Bengals play in a Super Bowl. I never expected this. But once you reach that benchmark, the expectations now change. The adjustments start happening. Everything becomes different. So then you follow up that great season that ended in a Super Bowl loss with another trip right back to the AFC Championship game. And they lost that game late. There was a roughing the passer call that should have been called on Joe Burrow. It wasn't. The officials gave Kansas City an extra down for some reason I still don't understand. A terrible punt by Drew Chrisman and a unnecessary roughness penalty on Joseph Osai, which was touchy, on Patrick Mahomes, and boom shakalaka. Where'd that come from? Next thing you know, the Chiefs are right back in the Super Bowl. And the Bengals lost. But either way, Bengals fans looked at that from that point forward, and it's like, okay, that's the standard. Each and every season, with Joe Burrow at quarterback, we should be expected to get to at least the AFC Championship game. Everyone's talking about Brady and Burrow, or Brady and Manning is now going to be Mahomes and Burrow. That's the next phase of quarterback play in the AFC. And, well, the Bengals haven't been back to the playoffs since. And with that comes a lot of conversation, because when you have all that success and you catapult yourself into being a relevant NFL franchise, with that comes a lot. Not only the expectations of the fan base, but also the attention of the national media. And, oh, by the way, the Bengals have done a lot since 2020. They've changed a lot. I've talked about this several times. They've done so much to put themselves into a better position as an NFL franchise. They sold the naming rights to Paul Brown Stadium. They made it Paycor Stadium. They put in the new uniforms. They put in the Ring of Honor. They have completely redone the in-stadium experience. It is an unbelievably different experience than it was just 5, 10, 7, 8, 9, 12 years ago. They have done all the things that you need to do in terms of the external factors outside of football, including hiring people that are big on fan engagement, social media, digital media. And with that, they have cultivated and enabled a loud, boisterous, and active fan base on social media. With that comes more voices, more opinions, and more eyeballs to every move that you make. This may have been an unintended consequence for the Bengals, because on one hand, the Blackburn girls, Caroline and Elizabeth, are saying, hey, these are all the things we need to do. This is what all the NFL teams are doing, and we need to be in this as well. We need to be doing these things as well. Okay, great. Perfect. You're now there. Unintended consequence maybe for the higher-ups of the organization is that every little thing you do is scrutinized and pushed back on and questioned and completely and utterly devoured as to and analyzed every little thing you do. And for years, those higher-ups, Katie Blackburn, Troy Blackburn, and the president, Mike Brown, they don't care what people think. And for the most part, I don't think they care what people think even now. But Elizabeth and Caroline Blackburn do. That's their job. Partnership, engagement, that all that stuff, that's their job, to care what people think. And so for the first time in 35, 40 years, the Bengals actually care what people think. Now, do they care to the point that they're making football decisions based off of that? No, I don't think that they do. And I don't know that any team should. But inside the walls of Paycor Stadium, for the first time, how the franchise is perceived is actually a talking point. It's actually being discussed. It's actually something that they care about. Each and every week, because, and really each and every day throughout the NFL season, because the Bengals have cultivated this active, boisterous, exciting fan base. Well, that makes them, what's the best way to say this? An easy target for the national media. There's two ways to look at this. A, the Bengals are now relevant, so the national media will talk to them. B, the Bengals have now a large and active fan base that will generate engagement for said national media. This is something that the Bengals have cultivated. This is something that comes with winning. When you win and when you invest in your fans, you give them a platform, you enable them, you give them a voice, and because of that, you get more attention from the national media. Generally, that's a good thing, except when you fail. 2 years in a row, no playoffs. 2 years in a row, 9-8. This year, Jamar Chase wins the Triple Crown. Joe Burrow has the best season ever in the history of a franchise quarterback and is a MVP finalist. Trey Hendrickson, a Defensive Player of the Year finalist, first Bengal ever to lead the NFL in sacks. Jamar Chase, Offensive Player of the Year finalist. Like, this is in every way, shape, and form one of the biggest disappointments in the history of the organization was the 2024 Bengals. And they have to live with that. And now, each week, each day, there's a topic about the Bengals in the national talk shows. That didn't happen for years. For years and years, when I first started in radio, Bengals fans would always call in or they would tweet at us or whatever it might be, and they would say, nobody ever talks about us and the national media this or the national media that. And whenever they were talked about by the national media, Bengals fans often didn't like what was said. And I would always push back and say, well, the Bengals haven't done anything to garner positive attention, nor have they done anything to get the respect of the national media because, quite frankly, they haven't won anything. Well, now when you start to win, you get a little bit more respect. You get a little bit more eyeballs. And I was always wondering why? Why do Bengals fans care so much what the national media thinks? And quite frankly, it's still puzzling. I believe in what we do on our station on ESPN 1530. I believe in the local media and how good they are in covering them. And we know things, a lot of things, a lot more things at times than the national media does. We have a much better understanding of some of the ins and outs of the organization. Not everybody, and certainly there are people within the national media who are plugged in to what the Bengals do and have great sources inside the organization, but so do we. And I've always wondered, why do you care so much what the national perception of the franchise is? Because for years, the national perception fit. They were coming up short. They were largely irrelevant. They could never win the big game. They, at times, were a laughingstock, the doormat of the National Football League. And so now, I think this can be a good thing. Putting the pressure on the organization each and every day on the national media. Like, they're talked about all the time. And they talk about how the organization has failed Joe Burrow. They talk about how badly the organization screwed up the Jamar Chase contract and how badly the organization has put themselves in this position with T. Higgins and how Trey and T both requested a trade. And when you not only have the national media saying this, but you also now have this loud, boisterous voice of a fan base all over social media, and in the season ticket emails and on the news in Cincinnati and whatever it might be, constantly talking about the things that the Bengals need to do better. I think that pressure can be a good thing to say, you know what? Okay, maybe we should change this. I'm not saying it will, and maybe I'm completely off my rocker, but I know for a fact that there are people inside that organization who care more about the public perception of this franchise than at any point in its now over 50, nearly 60-year history. More than any point, the public perception matters to the people inside that building. That can be a good thing. And on top of that, it's not just the fans that are saying these things. It's not just the national media that are saying these things. It's also the quarterback. The Bengals, I don't think, have ever had a superstar quite like Joe Burrow. I don't think at any point this organization has had a guy this big of a deal. He is top 2 quarterbacks in the NFL. Quite frankly, I think he's the best quarterback in the National Football League. Just from the myriad of reasons. Obviously, winning part of that, but not the full picture. I just think top to bottom, Joe's the best quarterback. It's not a shot at Mahomes. It's not a shot at Goff. It's not a shot at Lamar or Josh. It's not a shot at any of those guys. But I do think Joe's the best quarterback in the NFL. He's also one of the highest paid players in the history of the league, more than any Bengal in history. He's got a resume in getting the Bengals to the Super Bowl that only 2 other quarterbacks in the history of the franchise have. He's also got a national championship in college, a Heisman Trophy, the greatest college season ever, and this rabid group of fans that follow him. In today's day and age, and especially in some sports like the NBA, young people and young fans follow players more than they follow teams. It's concerning and something that's a topic of another podcast episode down the road, but Burrow has a legion of fans, and they don't know or care about the history of the franchise. They want him to succeed. And when he doesn't, because the team lets him down, which they did this year, you'll hear from those fans, those legions of fans. But you're also hearing from Burrow. Now, Chad Johnson is probably the most outspoken player in the history of the franchise, but Chad Johnson wasn't dragging the Bengals the way Joe Burrow has. He has repeatedly said that he will be disappointed if T. Higgins doesn't return. He has repeatedly said that the Bengals need to pay players what they deserve. He has repeatedly said that we have players who deserve to get paid, who are great at what they do. He has constantly put the pressure on the organization more than any player in the history of the franchise has. He's also probably the most important player in the history of the franchise, because now here you are with a window to actually win the Super Bowl. And he has been the one who has cultivated this new age of Bengals football. He's brought in tons and tons and tons of new fans and new season ticket holders and sold merch and got you to sign to essentially sell the naming rights of the stadium so you could help pay for the guy, and so on. He's the most important figure from a player standpoint in the history of the franchise. And he is joining the national media and the fans in constantly talking about how the Bengals' shortcomings need to be fixed. When he was at the Pro Bowl games this week, he talked about how the Bengals have players that need to be paid what they deserve. And when you think about it, T. Higgins is probably going to get $30 million on the open market. That's a lot of money. The Bengals aren't going to pay that, and I don't think they should pay that. But the market, especially when Jamar gets his deal, is going to drive up the price of T. Higgins. I think Joe knows that. I think T knows that. I think Jamar knows that. Even though they all want to play together, and Chad Johnson said it this week as well, you don't give hometown discounts on your first contract, especially for a guy who's as injury prone as Higgins has been over the course of his career. He's not giving out He's not giving out a hometown discount. He's not going to take, if he can get 7 or 8 million more average annual value than what the Bengals might offer him, he's going to do that, and he should do that. The Bengals could also franchise tag him at $26 million. He wouldn't like that, but $26 million is $26 million. Either way, to me, Joe continuing to put the pressure on the organization is not as much about we have to have T. Higgins here. We got to bring T. Higgins back. As much as it's about you, the Bengals, need to put yourselves in better positions so that I don't have to call you out for contracts. So that the conversation is not about what the Bengals are going to do this offseason because they screwed up the Jamar Chase deal so bad, and because they screwed up the T. Higgins deal so bad, and because Trey Hendrickson is asking for a trade because he's not fairly compensated compared to the other peers, his other peers at that position. These are all holes that the Bengals dug themselves into. And now Joe is the one who's throwing a little bit more dirt on them while they're in there. And he should, because this sort of team building is archaic. It's outdated. The Bengals need to get with the times in terms of guaranteed money, in terms of upfront money, guarantees, all these different things that come into building a roster, the way the Philadelphia Eagles do it, the way the Kansas City Chiefs do it. You can see it. There's a blueprint for it. And the Bengals aren't the richest franchise in the NFL. Everybody knows that. They have a history of being cheap, notoriously cheap, and people sometimes push back on that. The reason the Bengals have the, perception, what's the word I'm looking for? It's not perception. What's the word I'm looking for? Reputation. The Bengals have the reputation of being cheap because they're cheap. There's a reason for that reputation, because repeatedly they've done things that lean into them being a cheap franchise. So to me, it's less about, hey, pay T and pay Trey, and more about Joe sending the message that I don't want to have to do this every year. We shouldn't be going through this right now. It all should have been avoided if you got the Jamar deal done last year like you were supposed to. If you would have gotten the Higgins deal done 3 years ago like you were supposed to, we wouldn't be in this situation. And to me, that's the message that Joe is trying to send. And I think it's also interesting where we're at in this crossroads with the fan base, because it's easy to be a Bengals fan when they're winning. It's really, really easy. And there are segments of the fan base that will never say anything negative about them. And I think that's wrong. I think it's the job of the fan base to hold the organization accountable, to hold the organization to a standard. When you think of Super Bowl 59 coming up this week, there's the quote-unquote villains that are the Chiefs, and people hate Philly fans so much they won't root for the Eagles. I love Philadelphia fans. They're my favorite fans in the NFL. They do not accept anything less than extraordinary. They expect you to be aggressive in the pursuit of championships, and anything less than high effort and high execution, they don't stand for it. And that, I think, is what the job of fan base is to do. Bengals raised their season ticket prices again this year. They didn't go to the playoffs. They raised their season ticket prices in the middle of this season when they weren't going to go to the playoffs, and they had one of the worst defenses in franchise history. It's not cheap to go to a Bengals game. It's not cheap to buy tickets. It's not cheap to go down and park. Bengals fans invest a lot of time, money, effort, and energy into this franchise. And they should hold them accountable and hold them to a standard, much like Joe Burrow is, and much like the national media is. The perception of this franchise matters now more than ever. And that is a result of winning. You are in the midst of a window with great players and the greatest quarterback that's ever worn orange and black and worn those stripes. The pressure that you are feeling is a privilege, and the Bengals should lean into that. Before we wrap things up, Super Bowl 59. Coming up on Sunday between the Kansas City Chiefs and Philadelphia Eagles. Everybody seems to be taking the Chiefs. I'm going to go with Philly. I think Philly's going to win this game. I think it's going to be a short game. I think it's going to be quick. I think they're going to hand the ball off to Saquon Barkley quite a bit. And if Jalen Hurts can deliver on some deep balls, especially on play action, if they get A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith in some one-on-one situations, he can deliver down the field, accuracy, deep balls. I think Philadelphia could potentially run away with this game. But if it's down to the nitty-gritty and it's close and it's late, it's hard to pick against Kansas City, Patrick Mahomes, Andy Reid. But the way I see it, I think Philadelphia is a better team top to bottom. And I think overall, they can win this game and win this game comfortably. And I hope they do. So I'm going to say Philadelphia 23, Kansas City 13 as the final score of Super Bowl 59. I didn't do something last week on the podcast, and in my return, I got so caught up in all the other stuff that I forgot to do it. So I'm going to do that in just a second. But I invite you to listen to me weekdays from noon to 3 on ESPN 1530. It's called Cincy 360. I co-host a show there with Tony Pike. You can listen on the iHeartRadio app, or if you're local in Cincinnati, on your radio dial on ESPN 1530. I invite you to follow me as well at Auty Elmore. That's AUTYELMORE. You can do that on Twitter or X if you're one of those people. Instagram nowadays. YouTube, search the Ball Don't Lie podcast with Auty Elmore. And TikTok. I'm trying my hand at TikTok. I went viral on TikTok. And by viral, I mean I got like 20,000 views on an ice cream review. Maybe that's part of my future. Ice cream reviews. Anyways, that's it for this episode. We'll see you again next week. And as always, have fun, be safe. Go Bucks.